The iron yard is cold enough to sting your fingers, and the air smells of damp brick, soot, and yesterday's gas. Before most of London has properly stirred, you are already standing among ladders, oil cans, and trimming tools, waiting for enough light to begin the morning round. A lamplighter in the late 1890s is not a romantic silhouette drifting through fog, but a municipal worker with a route book, a fixed wage, and dozens of lamps to put right. Each one must be extinguished, checked, cleaned, and made ready to burn again at dusk. The work is quiet, repetitive, and blackens the hands almost at once, because burner caps, glass panes, and metal fittings all keep a thin film of grime. This morning, several lamps have burned weakly through the night, and that means stopping longer than you would like. A poor flame can come from low pressure in the main, a dirty jet, worn parts, or gas that was never very good to begin with. So, instead of hurrying on, you make careful notes in the cold and fall behind before the city is fully awake. And from there, the whole long day of tending London's streetlight begins to unfold, one small delay at a time. The first lamp on your troublesome list stands at a corner where the paving stones hold last night's rain and the glass is filmed brown from a flame that never burned clean. You set the ladder, climb only a little way, and open the small iron door with fingers already stiff from the cold. Inside, the burner head is warm enough to remind you the night has only just let go of it, and the smell is sour, half gas and half soot. You turn the cock, bring the flame down and watch it die to a pin, then to nothing at all. That should have taken a moment, but the jet is fouled, and the tiny opening that ought to feed a neat, clear flame is edged with residue. So you stop to clear it. That is the first concrete loss of time, and you feel it at once, because one careful minute at one lamp becomes many by the end of the road. Your route book sits under your arm, already damp at the corners, and you mark the lamp with a brief note about poor combustion and suspected low pressure. You know why the note matters. If the same lamp burns badly again tonight, the question will not be whether the city's gas arrived thin and weak from the main. The question will be whether you attended to it properly. That is the plain shape of the work in London by the late 1890s. It is no longer enough to light the lamps and move on. A vestry clerk may count complaints. A district inspector may compare one street with another. A superintendent may ask why one lamp smoked, why another went dark early, and why a shopkeeper on a better road insists his lamps are always brighter than yours. So when you find a fault, you do not hurry past it for the sake of appearances. You write it down because memory is too soft and blame is too hard. The street is still mostly empty as you move on, though not for long. A milk cart comes first, wheels whispering over the wet stones. Then a coster pushes a barrow under a blanket of sacking, head down, breath pale in the air. Farther off, behind the rows of brick and soot-marked shop fronts, you hear the first steady clatter from a stable yard. London wakes by layers. You are out before the faces come properly into the windows, before the shutters lift, before the clerks begin their walk toward trains and omnibuses. That early quiet is one of the few gentle things the job gives you. But even in that quiet, the second weak lamp takes longer than it should. This one has not smoked the glass so badly, yet the flame must have shrunk in the night, because the mantle frame is discolored and the metal cap is crusted at one side. You take it apart in the half-light, piece by piece, laying each part on a folded rag over your palm, so that nothing small can slip to the stones below. A missing screw can waste as much time as a bad burner. The lamp standard itself is damp to the touch, and the cold runs through the metal into your hand. When you look down the road, you can count how many remain before the turn toward the busier shops. Too many for this pace, so now a decision begins to press on you. You can make only the briefest checks, extinguish, wipe, and trust the rest to hold until evening. Or you can keep to the slower method, note defects properly, and arrive late to the yard with more truth than speed. You choose the slower method. It is not a heroic choice. It is a tired working man's choice, made because evening failures are worse than morning delay, and because a lamp that burns weakly at dawn has already given warning once. The trouble with warnings is that they ask to be answered twice. First in the cold of morning, then again when darkness returns. By the time you reach the row near the draper's shop, the city has found its voice. Not loud, not yet, but enough. A shutter drops somewhere behind you. A door opens. Water is thrown across a threshold and runs dark into the gutter. A woman with a basket pauses to let you lower the ladder from one lamp and shift it to the next. She hardly looks at you. That, too, belongs to the work. The lamps matter more than the lamplighter. People notice the street when it is dark. They notice the smoke when the glass clouds. They notice the flare when the flame runs too high and wastes gas. But the man with the route book is mostly another piece of street furniture, moving between iron posts with a rag, a key, and blackened hands. At the fourth bad lamp, the pattern begins to trouble you. These are not all on one short branch. They are spread along the district, thinly enough to seem ordinary, often enough to suggest the main itself may have run poorly in the night. That possibility changes the meaning of your delay. If the fault lies deeper than dirt in the burner, then your careful work may still leave you with the same complaints after dusk. You kneel by the base of one standard, listening as if the iron could explain itself. There is no grand revelation in it, only the faint smell that hangs near the fitting, and the old suspicion every lamplighter learns sooner or later that a good part of the job is being judged on things beyond your hand. Still, beyond your hand does not mean beyond your responsibility, so you add another note. Weak through the night, likely poor supply. Recheck before lighting. Those words cost seconds now and may save argument later. They also mean that your afternoon will not be your own. When the extinguishing round is finally done, you are later than usual returning to the yard. The place is brighter now, though no less grim. Daylight shows the soot better. It lies on brick ledges, on ladder rungs, in the cracks of tool handles. There are racks for poles, shelves for spare burners and fittings, tins for oil, boxes for chimneys, and the rough wooden bench where dirty glass can be set out in a line and brought back to clarity, one piece at a time. Some London streets still held older lamp forms in these years, and some districts carried the remains of older habits even after newer gas fittings spread. So the yard stores a little of everything. Trim knives, cleaning wires, rags gone stiff with use, replacement parts wrapped in paper. The tools of the trade are not beautiful. They are municipal. They are practical. They are made to be gripped in weather. One of the other men has already come back and is scraping carbon from a burner with the patient expression of someone who has no expectation of praise. He asks, without much interest, whether your line burned well. You tell him, not particularly. He gives the small nod of a man who has heard the same answer in 10 forms over 10 winters. Then he mentions that a supervisor has been walking the commercial stretch again. That is the next unwelcome development. Not an argument, not even a warning yet. Just the fact that complaints have reached a level where someone from above is taking personal interest in a few blocks of shops and omnibus traffic. The road in question lies on your evening round. The shopkeepers there are the sort who notice everything that affects trade. If a lamp smokes, they say it dirties the frontage. If a lamp burns weakly, they say customers avoid the corner. If fog comes down and one light is dimmer than the next, they say the whole district is neglected. Sometimes they are right. Sometimes they simply speak more loudly than the people in poorer lanes. Either way, their words travel farther. You wash your hands in cold water that never quite removes the black from the creases, then begin the daylight work that most people never think about. A street lamp does not merely wait between dusk and dawn. It has to be kept fit. The glass must be cleaned, so yesterday's smoke does not become tonight's dimness. The burner holes must be cleared so gas can emerge in the right measure. Hinges and catches have to be checked, because a jammed little door at the wrong moment can throw off a whole run of lamps after sunset. The labor is exacting in a small way, not crushing, not theatrical, just steadily demanding. You sit at the bench with a row of dirty panes and work them one by one. Each cleaned piece catches the weekday better than the last. There is satisfaction in that, though it is the narrow kind. the kind that fits in the hand. At midday, the superintendent comes through the yard, coat buttoned high, boots clean enough to mark him as less of the street than the men he oversees. He does not shout. He does not need to. He asks whether the lamps near the busier crossing are in better condition than yesterday. You answer that several on the route burned low through the night, and that you have marked them for closer attention before dusk. He asks whether you think the issue is dirt or supply. That question is not as neutral as it sounds. If you say dirt, the fault leans toward the lighter. If you say supply, the fault leans toward the gas company, and companies dislike faults that can be counted. So you answer carefully. Some appear dirty, some may be suffering from weak pressure, several should have new parts fitted before evening. He listens with the expression of a man silently measuring cost. Then he tells you the commercial street has drawn fresh complaints. One lamp flared, another smoked in fog, a third, according to a tobacconist, was scarcely worth the match that lit it. The words are almost funny, but no. One smiles. You are given no direct order, only a reminder that the district is being watched more closely, and that punctual lighting matters as much as proper burning. That is the heart of the strain. The work asks for care, and the office asks for speed. The city wants each lamp to be right. It also wants all of them right at once. Back at the bench, you look at the spare mantles, the wrapped burners, the cracked panes set aside for replacement, and you understand that the next decision is heavier than it seems. You can save your strength for the evening round, keep your feet and back for the miles still to come, and do only the minimum now. Or you can carry extra parts back out into the streets in daylight and try to improve the worst lamps before darkness turns every imperfection public. You choose repair. Again, not because it feels noble, because you know the alternative. A weak lamp in daylight is a note in a book. A weak lamp in evening fog becomes a witness against you. So after a plain meal eaten standing up, bread, cheese and tea gone lukewarm too soon, you load what you can carry. A wrapped chimney, 2 burner assemblies, small tools, rags, a few mantles protected as best they can be. They are delicate things, those mantles, especially in the earlier years of their use, and not every district trusted them equally at first. But where they are fitted well, they can give a stronger, whiter light than old naked flames, and cities notice brightness quickly. You set out again through streets that are no longer empty. Now the city presses around the work. Children cut across your path. Tradesmen shoulder past. A cab wheel sends a strip of muddy water over the curb. At one corner, you have to wait for a brewer's dray to clear enough room for the ladder. At another, a shop assistant asks whether the lamps will be right tonight, as if asking whether rain is expected. You tell him you're seeing to them. That answer costs nothing and promises too much. At the commercial road, the trouble is plain enough. One lamp has a pane cracked so neatly it was almost invisible in dawn gloom, but in daylight, the line runs from corner to corner like a scratch in ice. Another has a burner worn enough that the flame would never hold evenly for long. A third opens badly because the little hinge has taken rust and stiffness together. Each fault is small. That is what makes the work wearying. Nothing is grand enough to justify itself. It is all little things that must still be done. You replace what you can on the spot. Climb down, move the ladder, climb again, fit the part, test the catch. Wipe the soot, write the note. Move on. By the second hour of this, your shoulders know exactly what the day has become. The weight is not only in the ladder and tools, it is in the vanished margin. Usually there is a cushion in the afternoon, a little breathing room before dusk, enough time to return, wash, check the route book, and begin the lighting round with some steadiness left in the body. Today you are spending that cushion out on the pavement. You feel it thinning with every repair, and once time is spent, there is no trimming it back into shape. The sky begins to change almost before you want to admit it. Not dark yet, but less generous. The weak winter light on the brick fronts turns flatter, greyer. Shop windows catch what they can. The air has that late-day chill which seems to creep up from the stones rather than down from the clouds. You finish with one more troublesome lamp near the omnibus line, test the fitting twice, and close the door with a little extra pressure to make sure it catches. Then you step back and look along the road. This is the same street you knew this morning, and yet it is not. Now every lamp you touched feels like a promise waiting to be examined. You turn toward the yard with dirty cuffs, aching hands, and less time than a careful man likes to carry into dusk. And as the day leans toward evening, the work begins to change its nature. What was maintenance will soon become performance. What was hidden in daylight will soon stand out to everyone passing underneath. At the yard, the evening tools wait where they always do, and that familiarity ought to be a comfort. Instead, it feels like a clock face. You take the long lighting pole first, the one with the small flame at its end, protected in its little metal chamber. In some districts, a lamplighter still worked with ladder and match, opening each lamp and touching fire directly to the gas. In others, he carried a pole arranged to reach the burner from below, through a small aperture, saving a little climbing and a little time. London in the late 1890s was not one thing all at once. Old fittings and newer fittings stood on neighbouring streets. One vestry economized in one direction, another in a different one. A route could feel like a map of overlapping decades. You check your keys, your book, your rag, your pocket matches, and the little supply of spare pieces that might rescue a failing lamp if fortune is kind. Fortune usually is not kind, but a man goes equipped anyway. There is no real pause before the round begins. No ceremony, no audience, just the thinning light outside the yard gate and the knowledge that each minute now has a public face. You step into the street with the pole balanced against your shoulder, and the first touch of evening damp is already in the air. It has not yet become fog. Not fully. But it is there in the way distance turns soft along the road, in the way the far windows lose their edges, in the way the horses seem to breathe out into a world less solid than it was an hour before. Your route has an order, neat in the book and sensible on paper. The order has been shaped by habit, by geography, by posted lighting times, and by the expectation that one lamp follows another like beads on a string. Begin here, turn there. Cross at the market end, take the side courts before the broader road, finish near the busier traffic as the dark fully settles. A route is supposed to be a chain. Its safety lies in sequence, but sequence assumes the city will stay still for you. It never does. The first lamps go well enough, and you almost feel your shoulders loosen. Open, test, light, close. Move on. Open, test, light, close. There is a rhythm to it that can soothe a man when the tools cooperate. The little door gives way under the key. The gas cock turns. The waiting hiss comes soft and thin. The flame touches, catches, and steadies. Then the mantle, where there is one, comes alive with that pale, brighter glow newer gaslighting promised to cities that wanted more light without committing fully to electricity. When the lamp behaves, the whole act takes less than a minute. That is how the book imagines the evening. A city of obedient lamps, a steady worker, no interruptions, no failed hinges, no low pressure, no children underfoot, no carts crowding the curb exactly where the ladder must stand. The book is a clean object. The street is not. At the fifth lamp, a catch sticks. Not badly. Only enough to cost half a minute and a little warmth from your fingers as you work the metal back and forth. At the sixth, the flame comes up with a yellow edge that tells you the burner is still not as clean as it ought to be, or the supply is not as even as the fitting deserves. You adjust it. Wait. Watch it settle. Close the door. Write one more note. You are not yet late, but the margin is already thinner than when you left the yard. On the broader road, the city is fully in motion now. Omnibuses move with their upper decks dark shapes against the dim sky. Shop fronts throw out the last of their natural light. A fishmonger is washing down stone with water that smells sharp and cold. A boy in an apron carries a tray of rolls from a baker's side door. and steam follows him into the street like something alive. All of it passes while you stand at the base of one iron standard, key in hand, doing work that has to fit itself between everyone else's evening. That is one of the less remarked strains of lamplighting. The job is public, but not central. You stand in plain sight, yet no one truly makes room for you. A woman with parcels pauses just long enough to ask whether this road will be lit early tonight, because her husband dislikes crossing in the fog. You say you're on it now. A carter mutters because your ladder legs take a little of the pavement he wants for his wheel. A child watches the ignition of one lamp as if it were a private miracle, then loses interest before you have closed the door. The city receives the service and keeps walking. You come to the commercial stretch that drew complaint in the morning, and here the atmosphere changes, not dramatically, just enough. These shopkeepers know your face. They know the sequence by which their lamps ought to appear. Some stand near their windows with that subtle, fixed attention people give to work they intend to judge. A tobacconist glances up as you raise the pole to the lamp you repaired in daylight. A tailor, still arranging cloth in the front, looks from the lamp to his own window glass, as if calculating whether tonight's flame will flatter or spoil the look of his frontage. You light the first one cleanly. Then the second, then the third, with a moment's hesitation before the gas takes. You feel that hesitation all the way through your wrist. It is hardly anything. A second, perhaps two. Yet, under observation, a second lengthens. It becomes a question. Was the lamp ready? Did the repair hold? Are you behind already? The trouble with being watched is that ordinary time changes shape. The air thickens as you move farther down the road. Now the fog is unmistakable. Not the theatrical white wall beloved by later memory, but the common London sort that begins as a blur and a taste. Coal smoke joins it. Moisture catches it. Distance shortens. The lamps you have just lit seem to stand apart from one another more than they did in clear weather. Between them, the road grows uncertain much sooner, a gap that would pass unnoticed on I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. Clear evening could now leave a stretch of pavement feeling abandoned, and people notice absence sooner than they notice effort. You understand that at once. You also understand something less comfortable. If the fog thickens another degree, the book's tidy order will stop making practical sense. A lamp near a crowded crossing matters more than a lamp in a mews where only 2 late residents are expected. That is not what the printed route says. But the street, in weather like this, begins to argue with the paper. You stand for a moment under the next standard, looking not only at the lamp in front of you, but at the dim blur farther on where the omnibus road bends. The busier crossing lies ahead and to the right. The side streets on your list lie left, in their proper order, waiting their turn. It is a small decision in one way, only a turn taken sooner than usual, only a few lamps lit before others. Yet you know how these things harden once written down. The route book is not merely a memory aid, it is a shape of obedience. If a complaint comes, the first question is often not whether the choice worked, but whether the order was followed. Still, the fog has its own plain arithmetic, a dark patch where carts turn, horses shy, and omnibuses pass close is more troublesome than a dark patch in a sleeping court. You shift the pole in your hand, close the book, and turn toward the crossing. That is the moment the evening changes. Not loudly, not in any way the city around you would mark, but inside the work, it changes. Now you are no longer simply carrying out the round. You are managing it. That sounds grander than it feels. In truth, it means only that each later minute will have to answer for this earlier one. The crossing is already half swallowed by brownish fog by the time you reach it. Gaslight from the lamps you have managed to kindle nearby hangs in the air instead of seeming to travel through it. Horses emerge damp and dark from the murk, harness buckles giving back a weak little gleam. A tram bell sounds somewhere beyond sight, softened as though wrapped in wool. The first lamp at the corner takes quickly, and you feel a brief current of relief. The second does not. The key turns, the door opens, the cock gives gas, but the flame, when offered, catches with a mean yellow flutter, and almost dies again. You wait, adjust, try once more. This time it steadies, though not as strongly as you would like. Already a cart has slowed beside the curb because your ladder foot and your body, bent close to the iron, occupy the narrow practical space where traffic prefers not to notice labor. The driver says nothing severe, only clears his throat in the tired public way of men who want a road to be a road and not a workplace. You move on to the next lamp. This one is better. Then another. The crossing begins, lamp by lamp, to gather its proper edges back. You see people alter their path as the circles of light appear. A woman with 2 children cuts across sooner than she first intended. An omnibus driver leans less from his seat. A constable at the farther end no longer stands in silhouette only, but comes into view as a man again. That is the strange, modest satisfaction of the trade. When it goes well, the result looks ordinary almost at once. The danger thins. The street resumes. No one sees the effort remain behind it. You cannot stay to enjoy even that small thought. The altered order has started a debt behind you. There are still side courts and narrower rows left dark longer than they should be, and every minute spent at the crossing lengthens that delay. So you turn back into the lesser streets with the uncomfortable feeling of having done the sensible thing and made your position weaker. In the side lane off the main road, the silence is different. The traffic noise recedes quickly. Here the fog lies lower and stiller. The houses are close. The windows are mostly curtained now. Someone has lit a kitchen fire with damp coal, and the smell crawls out across the lane in a sour band. The first unlit lamp here seems almost accusatory simply because the lane beside it is so dark. You work more quickly than you like. Not carelessly, but with less pause between steps. Open, touch flame, check, close, move, open, light, move. The pace brings its own hazards. A latch that deserves a second tug gets only one. A burner that ought to be watched another half-breath is trusted sooner. Your notes in the route book shorten. Good, fair, weak on ignition, recheck if time. That phrase, if time, begins to appear too often. At one narrow court, an old man in a shawl-collared coat stands below the lamp before you reach it. He says nothing for a moment. He only waits while you set the ladder and climb. Then, in the mildest possible voice, he says this: "One ought to have been lit a little ago." He is not rude. That almost makes it worse. If he were abusive, you could place him among the many small hostilities of street work and leave him there. But he sounds merely inconvenienced, as if he has noticed the clock and the darkness together and found the pair out of agreement. You tell him the fog has made the busier roads troublesome. He nods once, not in sympathy, only in receipt of information. Then he says his granddaughter dislikes coming through the lane in the dark. That is all. He goes in. You finish the lamp with a care sharpened by irritation, though not at him. At the structure of the work, at the way every practical adjustment instantly creates a deserving person somewhere else. No route can light everything first, yet every street, to the people living on it, feels like the natural priority. The lane after that is blocked halfway by a brewer's dray making a late delivery. You wait as the men roll casks down with deliberate heaviness, their boots slipping a little on the wet stones. One of them offers to shift enough for you to pass. Another says, "It will only take a minute." It takes longer than a minute. Nothing in this trade takes only what it first promises. By the time you squeeze beyond them, your gloves are damp, your cuffs smell of horse, and another little section of darkness has remained darkness because barrels had to move. No office book has a clean box for that. There will be no line in a complaint ledger reading "delayed by dray" at service entrance. There will only be a dark lane noted by someone who came through it before you did. You light 3 lamps in close sequence, and for a few precious minutes the route behaves. The keys fit, the catches give way, the gas rises true enough. The fog even seems to hold still instead of gathering. You feel almost capable of recovering the lost time. Then one of the repaired lamps on the return stretch proves uncertain. It is a lamp near a chandler's shop. one whose burner you changed by daylight. The door opens cleanly, which is something. The gas is there, yet the flame burns too broad and yellow, not starving now, but flaring. The sort of unstable, wasting flame that throws more annoyance than useful light, and smokes the upper glass besides. You lower the setting. Wait. It shrinks too far. Raise it a little. It pulses. You can feel the instability in the tiny changes of sound, a faint, irregular hiss and catch. The supply is moving under your hands like something with a mind of its own. That is when you understand, more clearly than before, that whatever has been wrong today is not only dirt and worn fittings. There is a deeper unevenness in the gas itself, or at least in the pressure feeding this part of the district. A lamp on poor supply can be made to behave for a minute, sometimes two. It can even be coaxed into respectability long enough for a passerby to think all is well. But if the pressure rises and falls in the main, the lamp is never fully yours to command. You make the best adjustment you can and close the door. Then, because you know, this one may turn witness later, you write more than a quick mark. Flared at lighting. Adjusted twice. Suspect pressure irregular. Those words cost you another half-minute on the pavement. But without them, the evening becomes only accusation and memory. As you near the next turning, you can no longer deny that the sequence in your book has been broken beyond easy smoothing. The numbers of the lamps no longer follow your pencil marks neatly. One line in the margin points to a detour, another has a note squeezed beside it. If an inspector looked only at the book, he would see disorder. If he had been at your shoulder all evening, he might have seen management. The difficulty is that inspectors usually arrive after the fact. They inherit the page, not the weather. On the farther road, a woman from the lodging house opens the door and leans out, just as you touch flame to a lamp over the pavement. The light catches her face, then dulls it again through the mist. She asks whether the rest of the row will be long. You say not too long. She says one of her men works late at the market and has taken a tumble before in bad light. Then she goes back in. Again, nothing theatrical. No shouting from windows. No crowd gathering. Only one more person placing a very ordinary need beside your already crowded minutes. The evening grows tiring in exactly that way. Small claims, reasonable claims. More of them than can be answered at once. At the next corner you hear the clatter before you see it. A delivery cart, moving a touch too briskly for the conditions, comes through the fog at an angle, the horse uncertain on the slick stone where the curb bends. There is a scrape. A jolt of wood on stone. The near wheel clips hard enough to jar the whole cart sideways. Nothing overturns, nothing shatters into spectacle. But the noise carries. The horse stamps. The driver swears once, more from alarm than fury. And a constable, who must have been somewhere near in the haze, comes out of the murk almost at once. You are not at that precise lamp. You are half a street away working another standard, but the nearness is enough. The constable looks first at the cart, then at the darkish interval between the nearest lamps, then at you. It is not a dramatic summons. He raises a hand. That is all. But you know what the gesture means. Time must now be spent where you did not intend it. You go to him with the pole in one hand, your ladder scraping lightly over the stones behind you. The driver is already insisting that the corner is ill seen in this fog. The constable asks whether the nearest lamp was late lit. Not angrily, in the measured, collecting tone of a man beginning to fit observations into reportable form. You look up. The nearest lamp is burning, but weakly enough in the fog to seem farther away than it should. The one beyond it is also lit, though the mist between them eats much of the benefit. The dark patch is not a true absence of light. It is something more difficult to defend, a place where enough light exists to satisfy a bare statement and not enough to satisfy an irritated witness. That is a dangerous middle. If the lamp were unlit, the fact would be plain. If it was strong and clear, the question would fade. But a poor lamp in fog invites interpretation, and interpretation loves a name attached to it. The constable asks again, and this time more specifically, whether that lamp was attended to at the proper hour. You answer that you altered the order because the main crossing needed lighting first in the thickening fog, and that this stretch was reached afterward. That is truthful. It is also, the moment you hear it aloud, an admission. Altered the order. The phrase lands heavily. The driver, who cares very little for administrative nuance, says only that the corner was bad enough to catch a wheel. The constable notes something in his small book. You feel the route behind you lengthen, dim, and waiting. Here is the decision the evening has been quietly preparing. You can stop, take the constable to the lamp, reopen it, test the flame, perhaps improve it, perhaps not, and spend several more minutes defending one troublesome patch of road. Or you can make a brief statement, trust the existing light to speak as well as it can, and continue before the rest of the district falls further behind. Either choice creates risk. If you stay, many lamps remain to be lit, and each of those delays may become its own complaint. If you go, the written version of this corner may settle without your full presence. You choose movement, not because you are sure it is best, but because the arithmetic of the route is merciless. One disputed lamp can consume 10 others, so you step to the lamp itself, give it the quickest practical look, adjust the flame a fraction higher, and say that you must continue the round. The constable does not forbid you. He only watches. That is somehow colder than interference would be. A man observed is already half translated into paper. You move on. The next lamps come in a weary sequence, and now every one seems burdened with more meaning than it had an hour ago. If a catch sticks, it is no longer only a stuck catch. It is another possible witness. If the flame hesitates, it is no longer only poor supply. It is another future question. By the time you reach the farther end of the district, where the houses grow meaner and the traffic thins, the fog has become almost granular in the gaslight, each lamp making a small, rough halo around itself. You are later now than the book prefers. Not scandalously late in a human sense, but late enough that windows have noticed. A girl carrying a jug quickens her pace toward one newly lit patch, then slows again once within it. A laborer with his coat collar up mutters that it is about time. Someone laughs from an upper room when the light reaches the wall opposite, though whether at you or at some private indoor matter, you cannot tell. Fatigue changes how the street feels. At first, each lamp is a task. Later, each one becomes a repetition. Then, after enough damp and delay, the repetitions lose their clean edges, and the whole round seems like one continuous act of opening, touching flame, closing, walking, writing, opening again. This is when mistakes most wish to arrive, not because you forget the work, the motions are too old for that, but because the body grows slow in a way the city does not allow. Your shoulder tightens from carrying the pole, your thumb aches from keys and catches. The soot at your cuffs has mixed with damp until the cloth feels cold and heavy. Even your eyes grow tired of reading small changes in weak flames. Yet the work asks you to keep distinguishing. Too yellow, too low, glass dirty, door not secure, pressure poor here, better on next standard. Those little judgments are the trade. Without them, you are only a man walking in fog with a stick of fire. When at last the final cluster of side streets is lit, you are not done, only turned toward completion. There is still the return through parts of the route where the earlier weak lamps may already be showing their truth. A lamplighter's evening is never a clean line from dark to light. It curves back on itself. The lamps lit first become old news unless they fail. The lamps lit late remain in memory longer, because delay sticks in people more stubbornly than steady service. And tonight there is the added knowledge that somewhere a constable has written something down. That single fact follows you more persistently than the fog. On the way back toward the complained-of corner, you pass the commercial road again. The shops are mostly shut now. Only a few lit windows remain. The tobacconist's blind is half down. A public house farther along sends out sound and warmth in a dim, wavering stripe each time the door opens. The lamps here are burning well enough, which should comfort you. Instead, it feels unfairly selective. Why should this stretch hold when the other misbehaves? Why should the public road seem orderly just when the private record of your evening has turned untidy? A man in shirt sleeves outside the public house glances up and says, "These lamps are better than last night." You almost laugh. Not because it is funny, but because praise arriving after complaint feels uselessly light. You nod and walk on. At the corner with the cart scrape, the constable is gone. The road looks ordinary again in the imperfect way roads often do. No visible consequence remains. Only the lamp. You go straight to it. Open the door. Look, the flame has sunk somewhat since your quick adjustment. Not out, not even disgracefully low in bare technical terms, but low enough and the fog thick enough that you can see how the corner would seem poorly served. You raise it a little, it answers, then flutters. There it is again, that uncertain feeding from the supply or from some fitting below the burner that no roadside tweak can reliably cure. You watch for several breaths. The flame steadies, then wavers. A second lamp along the same line shows a similar weakness, though not as marked. You had noticed trouble in daylight. Now you have evidence in darkness. Evidence, though of a sort that is difficult to carry into an office. A clerk likes a time. A supervisor likes a fault with a replaceable part. And a counted cost. What you have is a behavior, irregular pressure, uncertain performance, a lamp that behaves under the hand and droops once left to itself. You note both lamps carefully, using the nearest pool of light and angling the book away from the damp. Complained of corner rechecked. Flame low again after adjustment. Adjacent lamp also weak. Suggests supply issue online. The writing is cramped and ugly, but legible enough. Your fingers are too cold now for neat script. You stand there longer than you should, partly because you want to see whether the flame fails entirely, partly because you know that if the lamp should now go out in front of you, the matter would become simpler in one narrow sense. Out is a condition. Weak is an argument, but it does not go out. It only burns in a way that promises future annoyance. That is often the true shape of urban work. Not disaster, persistence, a thing just bad enough to consume time again tomorrow. From there you continue the late inspection, almost despite yourself. Originally, after finishing the route, you might have returned to the yard, handed in any urgent note, and let the rest belong to morning. Tonight, you cannot. The complaint has altered the meaning of fatigue. You no longer inspect because it is proper. You inspect because you can feel responsibility drifting away from systems and settling onto your name. So you walk another stretch, then another. At one lamp, near a warehouse gate, the glass is already beginning to smoke at the top because the flame is too rich. You trim it. At another, the catch failed to seat fully when you closed it earlier, perhaps because you hurried, perhaps because the hinge itself is poor. You set it right, and do not bother guessing which share of blame belongs to man and metal. Farther on, two boys have been loitering near a standard and vanish when they see you approach. The lower fitting bears fresh scuffs, and you suspect idle tampering. That, too, enters the trade as an unwelcome companion. Street lamps attract small hands. Curiosity, mischief, and the habit of boys to test anything with a hinge all work against clean administration. Yet if a lamp later falters, no complaint book writes mischief first. It writes failure. You add another note, possible interference. The pages of your route book, once mostly a sequence, are now becoming a crowded record of weather, parts, behavior, and excuses that are not excuses, only causes. By the small hours, you begin to understand that the route book has become a second kind of shift. It is no longer only a guide to where your feet must go, it is a defense written in cramped pencil against men who prefer clean lines to muddy causes. The city has grown quieter now, though not silent. A late cab passes from time to time. Somewhere a public house door shuts for the night with a flat, final sound. Far off there is the iron complaint of wheels being drawn over stone in a yard where someone is still unloading long after common business should have ended. In that thinner noise, each lamp seems to stand more alone. You notice things you could not notice earlier. A burner that hisses a little too sharply. A globe that mists on the inside when the flame runs rich. A standard that gives off the faint smell of old leakage near the base. This is the hour when responsibility begins to blur. By daylight, the world likes causes that can be pointed to. A dirty jet, a cracked pane, a careless worker. At night, standing under weak halos of gas, you see how much of the system is made of half faults. Nothing quite broken, nothing quite right. The main may feed one street well and starve the next. A service pipe may be lined with years of accumulation no one wants to pay to clear. A burner may be new enough in itself, yet badly matched to old fittings above it. And still, the expectation remains simple. The lamp should burn. You make your way through another row and stop at each of the trouble lamps long enough to form a clearer opinion. That is slower work than lighting. Lighting can be done by motion. Inspection must be done by waiting. You watch a flame after adjustment. You stand back. You look at it from the pavement rather than from the open door. You let a little time pass, because a lamp often behaves best in the first moments after being touched, as if trying to flatter the hand that has corrected it. Then, once left to itself, it tells the truth. At the corner where the constable stopped you, the truth is unpleasantly plain. The flame, though not gone, sits lower than it should for a crossing. It gives enough to show the outline of curb and horse, but not enough to cut a clean path through the fog. The neighboring lamp, as you suspected, does nearly the same, not as badly. Badly enough. That matters. If one lamp alone failed, the blame might settle tidily on one burner or one neglected fitting. If two close lamps both sink after being set, the fault begins to look less local. You take out the pencil again and write more carefully than your fingers prefer. Two adjoining lights weak after adjustment. Behavior suggests irregular supply rather than single dirty jet. Need morning examination of line and fittings. The pencil point breaks. For a moment, that tiny accident feels heavier than it deserves. You are tired enough that small impediments become almost personal. You sharpen it with your knife by the side of the lamp, the shavings falling dark and insignificant to the stones below. Then you continue. This is one of the lesser miseries of the trade. Not grand danger, not romance. Only the fact that every ordinary object, pencil, key, hinge, match, latch, can steal a little more of the body when the body is already nearly spent. At a lamp near the warehouse yard, you meet the night inspector. He is not there to help. That is not his office. He is there to see. He moves with a short, economical walk and carries his own notebook dry under his coat. He greets you without warmth and without hostility, just enough civility to begin the exchange. Then his eyes go to the lamp you are adjusting. He asks whether there has been trouble on this stretch. You answer that several burners have shown poor behavior in the fog, and that you suspect weak or uneven pressure along part of the line. He does not contradict you. He does not agree either. Instead, he says he has had one complaint already from earlier in the evening, and another informal word from a constable who mentioned a dim corner after a cart struck the curb. There it is. Not rumour now. Not your fear of paper. An actual path from street event to official ear. You explain, as briefly as you can, that the order of your round was altered because the main crossing needed lighting first as the fog thickened. He looks at you for a moment before writing that down. Again, the phrase hardens in the air. Altered order. It sounds like disorder even when reason produced it. The inspector asks whether the lamp at the corner was late or merely weak. You tell him both things are true in part, which is also the least satisfying answer available. It was reached later than the usual sequence would have allowed because you lit the busier road first. When you reached it, the lamp did not hold as strongly as expected. That answer contains the evening. It also contains no comfort. The inspector says he will make his own observation when he reaches the corner. Then he moves on. You stand for a second under the lamp, listening to his boots recede through the fog. No raised voice, no accusation. Only another line being prepared somewhere you cannot see. You finish with the warehouse lamp and keep walking. There is no point chasing after him. A man in your position does not improve his case by sounding urgent. Urgency can be mistaken for guilt by people who work indoors. So you let the inspector see what he will see, and you collect what evidence you can for yourself. At the next turning, a gas lamp over a narrow passage has almost gone to a ghost of a flame. You open it, and the smell tells you something before the sight does. The gas is there, but meanly, thin. The burner catches and then slackens. You try the cock. No great improvement. That means the trouble is farther back, in the feed or the pressure, not merely in the top of the lamp. If a gas company man was standing beside you, he might shrug and say the district always takes a little time to settle after peak demand. That sort of explanation has enough truth in it to survive. It also leaves the lamplighter holding the public face of a failing system. You make another note. This one shorter, barely feeding, not corrected at burner. That phrase is for yourself as much as anyone else. You need to remember, in the morning light, which failures were touched and which resisted touch. Hours from now at a desk, tired recollection will try to smooth them all into one general dissatisfaction. The book prevents that. The book is memory tied down. Further on, you encounter another of the district men, older than you, finishing the end of his own route. He asks if yours has been troublesome. You tell him yes. He asks if it is the weather or the gas. You say both, which makes him give a little sound through his nose that might almost be laughter. That is the nearest thing to fellowship many workers ever exchange. Not sympathy with flourishes, just a shared recognition that a bad night never belongs to one cause. He says his side has burned badly near the market for the last week, whenever the damp settles thick. Then he adds that the company will deny it if anyone asks. Of course they will. A private company, a parish office, a superintendent, a night inspector, a constable, a shopkeeper, and a lamplighter can all stand under the same weak light and each carry away a different explanation. Only one of those men will be expected to return at dawn and clean the soot from the glass. You part from the other lighter and continue the round alone. Now the city has reached that late state in which sounds travel oddly. A footstep from one court rings clear. A wagon 2 streets over seems both near and far. The lamps hum in their faint way. The fog shifts. Sometimes the halo around a light broadens and softens, making the lamp seem to bloom. Then it tightens again, and the same lamp looks shrunken and inadequate. A passerby might call that inconsistency. You know some part of it belongs to the air itself. But the public does not inspect the weather. The public inspects results. At the complained of corner, you find the night inspector again, writing by the light of the very lamp in question. He has opened his coat slightly to shield the page. You stop a little short, not wishing to appear to look over his shoulder. He notices you anyway and says, without ceremony, that the light is poor for the position. Not out. Not wholly unserviceable. Poor. That is the word likely to endure in the record. You answer that it has twice fallen after adjustment, and that the lamp beyond is behaving similarly. He asks whether you marked both in the morning. You say yes. That part, at least, you can say firmly. Marked in the morning, repaired where practical in daylight, rechecked at night. A bad result after all that work is wearying, but not the same as neglect. He asks to see the notes. You hand over the book. There is always a faint indignity in letting another man hold the record of your day. Not because it contains secrets, because it contains effort. He reads the cramped lines by the weak gaslight, lips moving slightly over some of the shorter notes. Then he gives it back. He says the office will want timings. You tell him your sequence no longer gives clean timings after the order was altered for the crossing. He says the office will want them anyway. There is nothing to say to that. So you nod. That, too, is part of the work. Not merely accepting weather and worn fittings, but accepting questions framed as though the city were neat. After the inspector goes on, the street feels emptier than before. You close the door on the lamp and stand with your hand on the metal for a second. It is faintly warm, a useless sort of comfort. The lamp burns, and yet the problem remains. This is how many working nights end. Not with failure in the complete sense, with partial function and full inconvenience. One more stretch remains before you can properly say the inspection is done. You take it methodically. A lamp near the chapel is sound. Two near the terraces are mediocre but stable. The one by the ironmonger's yard smokes the upper pane and must be lowered slightly. At another, the lower access flap bears fresh scratches where some fool has tried it with a knife or nail. Possible tampering again. Another note. Another cause that will look like incompetence if left unnamed. You begin to feel the curious split that long municipal work can produce. The body wants simply to finish. The mind, made anxious by complaint, wants to keep gathering proof. Every extra lamp you revisit could help tomorrow's explanation. Every extra lamp also takes another few minutes from rest, and morning, you know, will not grant any discount for tonight's exhaustion. The extinguishing round will come all the same. That is one reason the job sucks, though the phrase would not have been yours then. The work doubles back on itself. A bad evening invades the night. The invaded night eats the next morning. Fatigue becomes cumulative, and the city keeps requiring punctuality from a man carrying yesterday in his legs. When at last you turn toward the yard for whatever remains of the night, the streets are almost tender in their emptiness. Most shutters are closed. The public houses are dark, except for one or two last rooms upstairs. A baker has begun before dawn, and there is warm yeast in the air near his side lane, a soft smell among all the soot and damp. The lamps stand in their rows, some good, some questionable, all now part of a system that will be judged at a desk by men who did not smell the street. At the yard gate, the brick is wet with condensed fog, and the hinges complain softly when you open them. Inside, the familiar objects are where they always are. Ladders against the wall, tools on pegs, dirty cloths in their box, the bench with its scars from years of scraping, fitting, wiping, and waiting. You set down the pole more carefully than earlier, because fatigue makes a man gentle with weight when he no longer has the strength to be abrupt. There is a lamp kept for the yard itself, lower and plainer than the street standards. Its light catches the soot on your sleeves and the shine on the iron hooks. You make what notes must be made before sleep erases shape from memory. Complaint at crossing after cart struck curb. Constable observed. Night inspector informed. 2 lamps low after adjustment. Possible supply irregularity on line. Those sentences look bare on the page. They do not show the waiting, the walking, the pressure of choosing one dark patch over another, but they are what paper accepts. You wash your hands again. The black in the creases persists. It often does. Soap can take the loose soot. It does not take the trade. Then you sit for a moment on the bench, not because there is comfort there, but because standing up again requires will. This is one of the human details no complaint book records. What the work does to the small private parts of a man. The stiffness behind the knees after miles of carrying a ladder and pole. The ache where the shoulder has borne the same weight in the same angle. The sting in the eyes after hours spent reading flames through damp glass. The meal taken too quickly and too early, so that by the small hours you are hungry again in a dull, resigned way. Some lamplighters carried bread in a pocket and ate standing by a wall if time allowed. Some made do with tea gone cold in a tin. Some, especially in winter, felt the whole trade as a long negotiation with cold fingers. It was not a grandly miserable profession. That almost made it harder to explain. No one sees a man blackened and damp from municipal gaswork and imagines poetry unless they are safely far from the shift itself. What the job gave, if it gave anything, was routine. A route to know, streets whose irregularities became familiar. Corner by corner memory, the knowledge that you could walk your district in half dark and still name which lamp had a poor hinge, which one tended to smoke in rain, which pane had been replaced in September, which shopkeeper would complain first, which would grumble and then help steady a ladder. There is comfort in that sort of knowledge. Not enough comfort. Still, some. You stand eventually, hang up what can be hung, and leave what must dry where it is. Sleep now is not deep, not because the body refuses it, the body would sink gladly, but because the mind has not yet set down the evening. The hearing has not happened, and yet it already occupies space in you. You know how these matters go. A complaint in itself need not be ruin. Cities generate complaints as naturally as smoke. But once a constable's observation meets an inspector's note, and once your own route book shows a deliberate change in order, the thing acquires form. It becomes administrative. And administrative trouble is quieter than a quarrel in the street, but more durable. You go home through streets partly lit by your own labor and partly by other men's. The irony does not impress you. You are too tired. The room you return to is small, and whatever heat it holds is stale by this hour. You eat something plain if there is anything ready, perhaps bread again, perhaps a little dripping, perhaps tea reheated and not improved by it. Then you lie down with the smell of gas, soot, and damp wool still caught in your clothes and hair, and the city goes on outside in the dark, largely unaware that one corner of it has become a file. The sleep that follows is short. It ends before it feels begun. A lamplighter does not own the morning after a bad night. He merely arrives in it. So before the sky has properly decided on day, you are back in the yard, with the complaint now settled into fact. The cold feels sharper because the body has not had time to forget the previous one. Your hands, when you first grip the ladder, remember yesterday before your mind does. Another man asks whether the night held, "I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request." Whether the weak lamps settled after midnight, and you give him the sort of answer working men often give when a full one would take too much strength. "Not really," you say, and he nods as if that confirms a suspicion he already had. The extinguishing round must still be done. That is one of the plainest cruelties in the trade. A lamp that gave trouble at night does not excuse itself in the morning. It has to be put out, opened, examined, and entered into the day's labor all over again. So you set out with the route book made thicker by fresh notes, and the streets still carry last night inside them. At the complained-of corner, the lamp is burning but poorly. Not dead, not sound, a little pinched flame with soot beginning to gather where the upper glass ought to remain clear. You extinguish it and open the fitting while the dawn is still only a grey wash behind the rooftops. The burner cap comes away with a faint tacky feel from residue. The smell is familiar now. Gas and old combustion, a smell that gets into the cuffs and stays there. You examine the jet again, you clear it again. You test the small moving parts again. Nothing in the top assembly is quite good enough to explain how badly the lamp behaved. That matters, not because it solves anything, but because it narrows the blame. The lamp beyond, the one you noted as also weak, gives you nearly the same answer. A little dirt, yes. Somewhere, yes. But not enough in either case to account for the repeated sinking of the flame. That leaves the line. The supply. The hidden length of pipe and pressure that belongs more to the gas company than to you, though no passerby would know the difference. You kneel by the lower fitting and hold there for a moment, not listening exactly, because there is little to hear, but measuring the thing by habit. A lamplighter becomes intimate with small resistances. The turn of a cock, the feel of a thread catching cleanly or not, the way a fitting answers the hand when pressure behind it is ample, and the meaner way it answers when the feed is poor. You cannot prove such knowledge the way a clerk proves arithmetic. Still, it is knowledge. You make a longer note than usual. Both lamps on this line weak again at dawn. Burners serviceable after cleaning. Fault likely not confined to top fittings. Request examination of supply and service pipe. The pencil moves slowly because your fingers are cold, and because careful wording feels suddenly like part of your actual trade. The work is no longer only on the lamp. It is also in how the lamp is described. As the rest of the round goes on, the city wakes in its usual layers, and that ordinariness makes your own worry feel strangely private. A boy runs messages for a baker, a woman sweeps grit from her doorstep into the gutter, a shopman lifts shutters one panel at a time, an omnibus horse stamps steam into the air, and waits to be put to work. All those little acts proceed as if the previous evening had not shifted under your feet. Only you are carrying the knowledge that some man in an office may soon take your ordinary route and turn it into questions. The yard looks no kinder in morning light than it did before, perhaps less kind. At night, fatigue softens details. By day, the soot is exact. The bench, the tools, the spare panes, the rags gone hard at the edges with old use, they all seem to belong to a system that has worn itself into habit so thoroughly that no one notices the effort anymore. You hand in the route book for copying of the most urgent notes, and the clerk who receives it does not look up much while reading. He is not unkind, he is simply of the office. He asks what time the complaint occurred. You say you cannot give the exact minute, only the stretch of the round and the approximate order after the crossing diversion. He asks whether the lamp was lit when the constable spoke to you. You say yes, but weakly. He makes a mark. Then he asks whether you altered your route by your own judgment. That is the phrase now, by your own judgment. You answer that you did, because the fog thickened and the busier crossing needed light first. He makes another mark. The marks sound soft on the paper, soft enough to be nothing, soft enough to trouble you all the same. By midday, word comes that you are to attend at the Vestry office later, after the afternoon maintenance is set in order. Not a summons dressed as thunder, only an instruction, yet it still changes the day. A hearing of this sort is not a trial in the grand sense. No wigs, no gallery, no single dramatic accusation. Only a room, some ledgers, men with pens, and the peculiar weight that ordinary details acquire once seated at a table. You are not dismissed from the day's labor for it. That would be too mercifully simple. You are expected to keep working first, so you spend part of the late morning doing exactly what you have done on other days: wiping glass, cleaning burner heads, checking catches, replacing what can be replaced, and all the while the coming questions settle in the background like dust. The strange thing is that routine continues to offer a little comfort, even under scrutiny. A pane clouded with soot can still be brought clear. A hinge can still be freed with oil and patience. A burner hole can still be cleaned by a hand that knows how much pressure is enough and how much would spoil it. The city may be preparing to doubt you, but the lamp itself still answers to craft. There is relief in that. Small relief, still real. At the bench, an older fitter tells you, without lifting his head much, that if the vestry wants a culprit, they will prefer one who can be paid weekly. That is not advice exactly, not comfort either, just a sentence laid flat on the wood between you. He has likely seen similar cases before: a weak lamp, a complaint, an inspector's note, a clerk's question, and then the familiar tug between parish economy and public blame. If the gas company can be pressed, the vestry may press it. If the company can cast doubt back onto maintenance, it will. And between them stands the man who carried the ladder. You ask whether he thinks you should speak plainly about the poor pressure. He says you should speak plainly, but not angrily. That distinction matters. An office forgives hardship more easily than it forgives tone, so you turn the phrase over in your head while your hands keep working. Plainly, but not angrily. Enough truth to defend the work, not so much force that it sounds like insolence. That is a narrower path than any pavement on your round. When the time comes, you wash again, as well as the cold water will allow, and set off toward the vestry office in your work clothes, made only slightly more respectable by the removal of loose soot. A municipal office in late 19th century London is rarely grand, but it does have its own sort of solemnity. There is polished wood where the yard has scarred wood. There are ledgers lined up square. There are coats brushed cleaner than yours. There is an air of ink, paper, dust, and the faint stale warmth of rooms occupied all day by men who sit more than they walk. The corridor outside the clerk's room holds a bench, and you sit there with two other men waiting on unrelated matters. One appears to have business about paving. The other carries some document folded and refolded in his hand until the edges have gone soft. No one speaks much. Office waiting has a way of draining language from people. A door opens. A clerk calls your name. Inside, the room is not large. That makes it worse in some ways. A large room can scatter attention. A small one concentrates it. There is a table. There are complaint books. There are one or two vestry men, a superintendent, and the clerk with the pen that will keep the shape of what is said. On the table lies a copy of your route notes. Not the whole labor of your day, only the parts judged relevant. That, too, is administrative life. The work arrives in pieces. You are asked first for simple matters, your district, your route, your usual order on evening lighting, the posted expectation for the principal roads, the condition of the weather. These questions feel almost harmless. You answer them easily enough. The trouble begins when the easy questions have built a frame. Then they place the evening inside it. Why, you are asked, did you depart from the ordinary order of your round? The wording is cleaner than the reality was. There is no room in it for mist thickening by degrees, or for the judgment made under a lamp while looking toward an omnibus crossing going dim. Only depart from the ordinary order. You say that the fog increased on the main road, and that you judged the crossing used by heavier traffic ought to be lit before the side courts. One vestryman asks whether you had authority to alter the sequence in that manner. You answer that a lamplighter must sometimes use discretion in weather. That is true. It is also precisely the sort of truth that sounds inconvenient in a room where authority prefers printed forms. The superintendent asks whether the side streets, left later by this choice, then drew complaint. You say some residents noticed the delay. He asks whether your route book gives times for those lamps. You say not exact times after the diversion, only sequence and notes on condition. The clerk writes. The pen moves steadily. It occurs to you that a man could drown quietly in such steady writing. Then the complaint of corner itself is brought forward. A constable reported a dim stretch after a delivery cart clipped the curb. The night inspector found the light poor for the position. Your own notes describe the lamp as weak after adjustment, with a neighboring lamp showing similar behavior. Do you maintain that the lamps were defective despite attendance? Yes, you say. Do you maintain that they were attended at a proper hour? There, the answer cannot be simple. You say they were attended later than the usual sequence because you altered the order to light the crossing first, but that when attended, they did not hold properly. The clerk repeats part of that back as he writes. Later than the usual sequence, did not hold properly. Separated on the page, the phrases feel harsher. One vestryman, a narrow-faced fellow with a habit of tapping the complaint ledger, asks whether the lamps had shown trouble in the morning. You say they had, and that you marked them for recheck. He asks why they were not fully put right in daylight. That question carries a hidden accusation. If they were known, why were they not cured? You answer as evenly as you can. One burner was cleaned, another fitting was adjusted. Further difficulty appeared to lie in the supply or line, not merely in the top parts that a lamplighter can service at the standard. The man asks whether you are a gas engineer. You say no, you are a lamplighter. The small room goes still in a particular office way. No raised voices. Only the sense that one sentence has landed awkwardly. You realize at once that the answer, though factual, may sound sharper than you intended. So you add, more gently, that you can report what repeated observation suggested, but examination of the deeper line would belong properly to the gas company or fitter assigned. That is better. At least you hope it is. The superintendent, who has enough street sense to understand more than the ledger reveals, asks to see where in your route book the morning defects were entered. You show him. He reads the notes in silence. Weak through night, likely poor supply, recheck before lighting, then the later lines. Flared at lighting, adjusted twice, supply irregular, and the night notes after the complaint. His expression does not soften exactly, but he seems to see that the problem has a history on the page, not merely an excuse after the fact. That is the closest thing to support the room is likely to offer. The questions continue. Did you revisit the corner after completing the main round? Yes. What did you find? A lamp low again after adjustment, and the adjacent lamp also weak. Did the lamps go out entirely? No. That answer helps and hurts in equal measure. A dead lamp is plain, a poor lamp is arguable. One vestryman remarks that the public does not distinguish finely between unlit and insufficiently lit where safety is concerned. He is right enough. The problem is that rightness in that form tends to flatten the labor behind it. You are asked whether tampering may have played any part in the district generally. You say yes, in places, though you did not observe fresh tampering at that specific corner on that specific evening. You are asked whether maintenance has kept pace on your route. You say as well as can be managed with the fittings in service, the weather, and the time allowed. Again you hear, even while saying it, how the office may take that answer, as complaint, as strain, as possible inefficiency. A working man in a hearing is forever trying to describe reality without sounding as though reality itself is an accusation. The talk turns, as perhaps it was always going to turn, toward cost. How many burners have required replacement this quarter? How often are panes being broken or cracked, whether newer incandescent arrangements, where fitted, are proving economical in gas use despite their delicacy? Whether repeated complaint from one district reflects worn infrastructure or poor attendance, it is almost soothing in a dry, tiring way to hear the matter become numbers. Not because numbers are kinder, but because they are calmer than blame spoken directly. Yet you also feel yourself receding in that part of the discussion. You are the man from the street, standing in a room where the street is being converted into expense. Then comes the wider unease beneath all of it. One of the vestrymen mentions that nearby thoroughfares under electric lighting have drawn favorable notice. Brighter pools, less complaint, no need for a man to visit each standard in sequence with flame and key. He does not say this cruelly. If anything, he sounds practical. That is worse in a way. Cruelty can be resisted in the mind. Practicality simply arrives and takes space. The superintendent says electric installations are costly at the outset and not yet suited to every road. Another says public comparison is growing harder to avoid. A third notes that ratepayers see bright electric roads and then complain more sharply of every yellow or wavering gas lamp. All of this is discussed while you stand there, as if your trade has been invited into the room chiefly to be measured against its replacement. That is when the larger uncertainty becomes plain. Not only that, one evening went badly. Not only that, your name sits near a complaint, but that the whole craft may now be judged by standards it was never designed to meet. Gas lighting belongs to rounds, to judgment in weather, to maintenance spread through hands and streets. Electric light, where it appears, belongs to switches, dynamos, cables, and a different class of failure. A dark electric lamp is still a problem. But it is not your kind of problem, and you can feel in the measured tone of the men at the table that many of them find the new type of problem cleaner. When they finally ask whether you have anything further to say, the room seems very still. This is the part where a man can worsen his case by speaking too much, or weaken it by speaking too little. You choose caution built on fact. You say that the lamps in question were marked in the morning, attended in daylight where possible, rechecked at lighting, and revisited later in the night. You say that the altered order was chosen because the main crossing had become poor in fog and carried heavier traffic. You say that the corner later complained of was indeed reached later than usual, but that its poor showing afterward appears to have arisen from deeper irregularity than dirt alone. You do not blame the gas company outright. You do not call the fittings shabby, though many are. You do not speak of fatigue, though your body is full of it. You keep the explanation close to the work. That is your best chance. The clerk writes the summary, reads portions back, and makes one or two small corrections at the superintendent's request. Then you are told, in that same measured administrative tone, that no immediate dismissal is contemplated. The phrase ought to comfort. Instead, it reveals how plainly dismissal had been near enough to name. You are further told that your district will be watched more closely for a period, that timings must be kept as accurately as conditions allow, that reports of defective supply should be made promptly through the proper channels, that deviation from route order, while perhaps sometimes understandable, is not desirable without clear necessity. In other words, you are not ruined. You are simply returned to your labor with less freedom than before. There is a warning entered. There is no dramatic end to the hearing, no gavel, no final speech. Only papers stacked, pens set down, and the subtle but lasting change in how your work will now be read. When you leave the office, the outdoor air feels colder and somehow easier to breathe. Not because the matter is settled. It is not settled. It has merely been given form. You walk back through streets you know almost too well, and the lamps, still unlit in daytime, stand there like patient iron questions. The first evening after the hearing has a peculiar quality. Nothing visible has changed in the route itself. The same standards, the same corners, the same uneven paving, the same gutters smelling faintly of wet ash and horse, and yet the whole round feels different because you are no longer moving only through space. You are moving through scrutiny. You keep stricter sequence now, not because the weather has become more reasonable, but because your room for discretion has narrowed. Each lamp is entered more neatly in the book. Each observed defect gets a fuller line than before. The route book, once partly memory and partly habit, becomes nearly ceremonial. Open book, check lamp number, attend flame, mark condition, move on. It slows you a little. That is unavoidable. Accuracy takes time. Time invites lateness. Lateness invites complaint. This is how municipal labor can tighten around itself until every improvement threatens a new fault. On the broader roads, something else has begun to alter the feel of the city. At certain crossings, on certain more prosperous stretches, there are now electric lamps. Not many everywhere, not enough yet to erase gas from London, but enough to interrupt the older rhythm. You notice them more sharply after the hearing because they stand for the comparison spoken over your head in that small room. An electric lamp does not wait for your pole. It does not ask for the little opening of a side door, the test of a jet, the cleaning of a smoked pane. Where the installation is in place and the current holds, it simply appears. Its light is steadier, colder, less alive to your eye than gas, and yet more assertive. One bright white source may do the apparent work of several yellower lamps set at intervals. Shopkeepers notice that, officials notice that. So do ordinary people, even if they do not trouble themselves with the machinery behind it. They simply see farther, they see more clearly, and in seeing that, they become less patient with every gaslit street that remains half dependent on weather and your tired judgment. You pass beneath one newly electrified stretch on the way toward your own district, and the contrast is almost rude. The road looks flatter, plainer, more exposed. Its shop signs hold themselves differently under that light. There is less softness in it, less mercy perhaps. Gas allows shadows between pools. Electricity, when bright enough, makes a cleaner claim. You do not hate it. That would be too simple and not quite honest. You can see its usefulness as plainly as anyone, but usefulness has a way of making older skill look cumbersome. That is the sadness beginning to gather at the edge of the work, not sudden ruin. Instead, it comes by inches, and that is often the harder thing to live with. You go back to your lamps with more care than before, almost with a kind of stubborn courtesy toward the work itself. If the trade is being measured for replacement, then you answer by making each movement cleaner. You stop forcing catches and begin easing them. You clean the glass until even thin winter daylight passes through with less brown in it. You trim, test, relight, and write everything down. That decision has a cost. A stricter sequence means fewer quick judgments and fewer private shortcuts. It also means the route feels longer, because now you are carrying the lamps and the record of the lamps together. A lamp that burns badly is no longer just a nuisance. It is an entry, a line in pencil, a possible question tomorrow. And yet, strangely, the discipline helps. For several evenings after the hearing, the district behaves well enough. Not perfectly. Nothing in gas service is perfect for long. but well enough that no fresh complaint reaches you by way of constable or clerk. The corner that caused such trouble still shows weakness now and then, especially in damp weather. But your notes go through the proper channel, and a gas company man is eventually sent to examine part of the line. He does not arrive with revelation. Men in that branch seldom do. He opens lower fittings, tests pressure with the practiced air of someone determined not to be surprised, and admits only that the supply on that stretch may be irregular during heavy demand. Maybe, that small phrase is all you get. Still, it matters. It is not an apology, but it moves a little weight off your name and onto the system where it belonged all along. The fitting at the corner is altered. A section is cleaned farther down. One service pipe is said to be in poor condition. No one tells you much directly. Municipal work often repairs things without formally confessing they were wrong. But after the visit, the lamp holds better. Not strong every night. Better. And in this trade, better is often as close to victory as a man can come. Yet the deeper change does not lift. Once you have stood in the Vestry office and heard your route discussed beside electric roads, you do not entirely return to innocence. You notice more of the new installations now. A bright cluster over a wider crossing. A row of electric standards on a commercial street where old gas posts once did slow patient service. The workers attached to those systems are not your sort of street men. Their labor is elsewhere. More centralized, less visible in the evening itself. A switch, a station, a cable, a maintenance crew called when required. Different tools, different knowledge. No ladder at every post, no round measured by footsteps and weather. You begin to understand that what is disappearing is not only a source of light, it is a whole method of city life. Gas asks for attendance. It asks for a man to know a neighborhood in detail. It asks for memory, judgment, and repeated contact with the same iron standards in all kinds of weather. Electricity promises distance instead, fewer hands on the street, more power gathered elsewhere, more certainty when it works, less intimacy perhaps. But cities do not usually pay to preserve intimacy. They pay to reduce complaint. So the comparisons continue. A shopkeeper on your route remarks, not unkindly, that the electric lamps on the larger road are a deal brighter. A Vestry clerk mentions in passing that ratepayers are pleased with newer installations nearby. An omnibus driver says he can see farther under the white lamps, though he still prefers the older roads in fog, because the gas gives a softer edge to things. That last comment stays with you. Softer edge. It sounds like a small, private defense of the old way, but softness is not the quality administrators are buying. They want reach. They want steadiness. They want fewer notes in complaint books, and they want, whenever possible, not to depend on one tired man arriving at the correct minute with a flame on a pole. So you keep walking. What else is there to do? The route narrows again into habit. One lamp at a time, one row, one crossing, one side street with its usual sticky latch, one corner where the wind takes the flame if you open the door too quickly, one lodging house where the woman at the threshold has stopped asking whether you are late and now only nods when the light comes. That is another thing about repetitive work. Even when the future grows uncertain, the present still asks to be done. You light the lamp in front of the baker's lane and smell warm bread behind the soot. You tend the one near the public house and hear the same laughter through the same door. You clean the pane by the drapers and notice that the crack in the pavement below has widened with frost. The city goes on teaching you itself in small details, even while preparing to make your knowledge less necessary. There is a sadness in that, but not a dramatic one. It is quieter than grief, more like being slowly outlived by a machine before you have entirely stopped working. In the weeks that follow, your warning remains in force, though it grows less sharp with time. The superintendent glances at your book more often. The night inspector asks shorter questions. A second complaint does not come. That helps. So does the steadier burning of the once troublesome corner after the gas company's partial attention. You are not restored to some perfect confidence. Trades like this do not offer that much. but you settle back into a more survivable uncertainty. The work still sucks in all the ordinary ways it always did. The cold, the soot, the miles, the way fatigue rolls from one shift into the next, the way every member of the public sees the lamp but not the layers behind it, the way a failing supply can become a personal failing once it reaches paper, and above all, the thanklessness. A good evening vanishes into the city at once. A bad one lingers. No one writes to praise a row of lamps that burned exactly as expected. They only notice where the dark remained. Still, there are moments, very small ones, when the labor justifies itself to the man doing it. A lane filling gently with light, a crossing made legible before the traffic thickens, a smoked chimney brought clear again, a burner that holds true after days of uncertainty. These are not grand satisfactions. They are workshop satisfactions, the kind that fit into a tired hand and disappear unless you are the one who earned them. By late winter, one more electric installation appears not far beyond your district. You pass it on the way to the yard. The standards are taller. The light is harder. It reaches farther across the road than your gas lamps ever could. People stand under it without glancing up, as if brightness of that kind were already becoming normal. That may be the final indignity. Not that new light arrives, but that it is so quickly accepted. The old work, with all its effort, all its repeated touch and adjustment, begins to look almost unnecessarily human beside a lamp that simply comes on. You do not say any of this aloud. There is little use. Working men rarely get to argue successfully with the direction of a city. At most, they continue carefully until the city no longer calls for them. So, on one especially clear evening, after days of damp, you take your round with a steadier pace and no need to alter the order. The air is cold enough to sharpen every sound. Hooves ring cleaner on the stones. Windows hold their reflections longer. The gas catches well, one lamp after another, and the halos are smaller without fog, more definite. For once, the crossing that caused such trouble looks almost handsome, not bright by electric standards, but calm, competent, sufficient. You stand there a second longer than the route really allows, not because anything is wrong, because nothing is. That, in itself, feels unusual enough to notice. You think then, though only faintly, that this may be the truest shape of the trade at its best. Not romance, not misery made theatrical, just a man moving through a city at the right hour, keeping little circles of order in place. There is dignity in that, if not much glory. And perhaps dignity is what makes the loss harder. A trade can be dirty, tiring, underpaid, and still carry dignity if it joins human need to patient skill. You finish the round. You make the return inspection. You note 2 moderate faults and 1 pane to be changed in the morning. Nothing more. No constable waiting in fog. No inspector writing by weak light. No cart striking the curb in a half-dark interval. Only the ordinary city. Only the ordinary work. Back at the yard, you put the pole away. You hang the key ring in its place. You wipe your hands on a rag already dark from years of similar evenings. The bench waits under the small yard lamp. The spare burners sit in their box. The ladders lean where they always have. Everything looks settled. But now you know that settled things can be temporary without showing it. That is part of what the job has taught you. Not only how to light a lamp, or clear a jet, or read a weak flame in bad weather. Also how a system can continue in full use while already being measured for replacement. The old standards remain upright. The route still exists. Your boots still know where to turn before the mind gives the order. And yet the future has entered the street all the same. One cable at a time. One bright road at a time. One comparison at a time. Outside, London keeps spreading and changing and asking for more light than the old methods were ever meant to provide. Inside the yard, the silence gathers around the tools. They are where they belong. For now, you make the last note in the book. Routine satisfactory. Corner improved after line work. Continue watch on damp nights. The pencil leaves a light sound on the paper. Then it stops. The workshop smell of soot, oil, and damp wood settles back over everything. The yard lamp hums faintly. A drop of water falls somewhere from brick to stone. You can hear the city only at a distance now. Muffled wheels. A late door. A horse shifting in harness far off. The night has room in it again. You close the book. You set it down. The tools are quiet now. The ladders are still. The lamps out on the streets are burning without you for a little while.